Hey, beautiful human. Welcome to episode 18 of From Chaos to Cozy, where we're on an amazing journey, gaining clarity around our chaos and how to see our cozy more clearly. In the last episode, we took a look at some of the other sources of our beingness in a little more detail, including our higher self and our emotional shadow. And in this episode, we'll look at another inner child within us. Maybe they're more like a kid because our emotional shadow, our emotional inner child, is formed 7 years old and younger. And the next two gain form after that. You know, the mental kid self and the physical kid self. And we'll chat about the mental kid self in this episode and then the physical kid self in the following episode after that. All right, so let's talk about the mental kid self. So after our emotional child is formed, 7 years old and younger, even into the womb, little emotional child is sent to the cellar, the subconscious, where it has great influence, especially over our self-worth and all those force fields that subconsciously keep events and people and situations from entering our lives until it does deem us worthy by the rate of emotional exchange it developed as it was formed. And you can find out more about all of that in the previous podcast episode if that seems intriguing to you. All right, so it is our mental kid self that sends our emotional child into hiding because it feels that it's safer for all of the beingness that we are if the emotional child's not having outbursts of emotion, getting punished for throwing tantrums and crying. And that's what the emotional child knows as far as how to express itself. It either laughs and smiles, which is normally encouraged by people, and or angry tantrums or crying, sometimes both with screaming in different ways, which is usually highly discouraged by the adults through praise and punishment. In order to be acceptable and not rejected by the tribe, the mental kid holds their hands over the emotional child's mouth and pushes them down, down, down into the basement. The emotional child still experiences and feels feelings, and as it does so, the controlling mental kid creates 1,000 thoughts around each emotion or how to either reinforce it to receive more if it brings positive reinforcement, or thoughts of how to never have that emotion happen ever again if it feels like it's a negative emotion that receives negative reinforcement through pain and punishment. Most of these thought patterns are formed from ages 7 to 14 and then just echoed throughout the rest of our lives until we question these mental beliefs of protection or drive for pleasure that were formed. During that time, it receives many popular opinions from others. Comes from parents, family, friends, teachers, pastors, the news, books, movies, TV shows, songs, and everything else we observe with our eyes and our ears. We don't know any better as children, and so we take it all in like a sponge, taking in all of these popular and sometimes unpopular opinions as our own opinion. The opinion gets reinforced to the point where it becomes our habit to think a certain way, to assign a certain story to a certain situation when it happens. The habit becomes so strong and fast that it becomes our reaction where it may not even feel like we're making a choice at all. Our thoughts are reinforced and formed from emotions. We are feeling beings who think, since our emotions are formed first. That is our first contact, our first impression of what's happening in the world. And as I mentioned, our mind wants to protect our heart, so when we feel certain things, our mind will create a network of thoughts and beliefs to avoid pain and attract pleasure. The mental kid is part of us that will put up like a baby gate at the bottom and top of the stairs to keep our inner child from tripping down them. But at some point, the baby gates are no longer necessary as we grow more emotionally mature and emotionally intelligent. And that's when we enhance our inner awakening by beginning to question our beliefs. There is a planetary energy that helps ignite these periods of reflection in our lives, and that is our Saturn return. Now, this is when Saturn returns back to the sign and degree it was at when we were born, so it's a natal return. And Saturn has an orbit of between 28 to 30 Earth years to complete its cycle all around the sun. So this is an event that we experience between 28 and 30 years old, and again in our mid-50s. Because the planet's orbit is so much longer than the Earth's, we can experience the feelings of this Saturn return for years before and after the actual return date, usually 3 to 5 years before and after, with the feelings being more intense as we near the return actual point. So a lot of our 20s is spent in the Saturn return cycle that causes us to reevaluate our belief systems. Every planet has a range of energetic expression. So depending on our own energetic choices and presence, we can have both challenging, expansive experiences as well as wonderful and freeing experiences. When we realize that our human brain is only conscious like 10 to 20% of what is really happening around us, within us, and in other people's lives, maybe even 30% at our most aware, it hits us that there are a lot of programs running on autopilot in our subconscious, below the surface, and a lot of information and charged emotion bouncing around in there too. Because of these unresolved thoughts, beliefs, and emotions existing, the Saturn return can be a bit bumpy in the beginning because it's revealing these things that were not in our view or our perception before, so that we can transform them. And I look at it like the Devil card in the tarot, which is ruled by Saturn. It's Capricorn energy too, and it shakes the cage that we have our heart in so that we can be aware that the cage exists and that there is indeed a door behind us that's never been locked. It actually has never even been fully closed. The first Saturn return can feel the most intense because it is us being faced with our unresolved beliefs and emotions, which we then spend the next transition of Saturn coming back around, redefining all of these previous experiences until we hit the second Saturn return. So that's that 28 to 30 more years. That return is more about learning about whatever we didn't resolve from the first return, but not through our own personal experiences. What? I know. Yay! We get to learn the second return by watching other people go through these things and by seeing them work out themselves in our dreams. So first return is us facing everything. The second one is us seeing it in our dreams and in our peripherals out in our world, learning that way instead of hands-on. And I feel like the third return, if we live that long, is more like we're teachers sharing what we learned over the last 84 to 90 years. And our revelations will show up as we question the popular opinions we took on from our parents or our caretaker, our religion, our culture, our society, where we are living in the world, what our circumstances are and were, who the main influences are and were in our lives. These are the people, the experiences, and things Saturn uses to form and define our approach to life. And what often happens in our 20s during the first return is that we begin to realize that much of what we experienced and know about life is based on what others taught or impressed upon us. And these things were defined by what was important or true for those other people. And you can begin to feel this separation between the path you want to go on and the old beliefs or dreams others gave to you, which we accepted readily as our own dream and path. Hey, we were children. We didn't know any better. We did what we did to survive. These beliefs might have been authentic and true for those people, but that isn't even guaranteed. Many children are born when their parents are between 20 and 35, right? And have they completed their Saturn return? Most likely not, meaning they were most likely just passing on what has been passed down by their parents, which was passed down from their parents, which was passed down from their parents, and so on, and so on, and so on, right? Who knows how long these beliefs have been blindly passed on? This is a period where we begin to weed out old beliefs and rules, finding our bravery as we walk away from what we thought we knew on this quest to find our authentic self and path for our lives. The degree to which we shed things, the unauthentic things from our lives, is a personal process. Anything we don't inquire into and transform completely during the first return will be presented to us during our second return. And of course, until then, we'll have to endure the experiences of our lives that will continue to be tainted by those unresolved beliefs and emotions for the next 28 to 30 years. Some experience their Saturn return as a huge alteration of their path, while others experience it as a time of validation of their life path. The positive aspect of Saturn return looks like things being brought to harvest, important events manifesting, bringing resolution to things seemingly out of thin air. But many people can also go through big changes in their lives during or after a Saturn return. They can get married or divorced. They can have children, or children leave the home, or some other significant milestone or situation with children can occur. We can start a business, can start a whole new approach to life. We can redefine ourselves. I have an astrological Zenergy video coming out soon where I'm going to dive even deeper into the Saturn return in more detail. So if this interests you, keep an eye out and make sure if you're a subscriber that you have your notification settings set to all. So the example I had before discussing the Saturn return was about the figurative baby gates on the stairs that were there to protect our child self from falling down the stairs. And in this case, the Saturn return can rattle those baby gates for us to show us that they no longer apply to us or were never needed and can be removed. Our cage can still be rattled outside of a Saturn return, of course. And when we're ready to see what no longer serves us, our shadow and spirit team will bring us the messages through a variety of messengers in the outside world, pointing to the thing that can be looked at. A couple of approaches to transforming thought beliefs that helped me were, first, realizing that emotions are what create thoughts. One emotional experience can trigger our brain to create 1,000 thoughts to duplicate pleasure or avoid pain and suffering in the future. If there are beliefs I want to transform, if I dive into the emotion at the root of the thoughts and transform it, then the thoughts related to that emotion will begin to transform on their own automatically. Super cool, right? An example of this is when I was facing my practice of beating myself up at work when I would not get a perfect score on my monthly phone audits, where a quality department would listen to 10 of our phone calls looking for a set list of things that needed to be done in the call, while also giving proper answers and actions based on all the company guidelines. And the company desired getting 70% perfect calls, 7 out of 10. Of course, my inner mind demanded 100%, 10 out of 10 perfect. And the day I'm remembering where there was a significant change in all that belief was when I received back a 90% on my call audit. And I had one error on the one call that was not, quote, perfect. I printed out the guideline, highlighted with exclamations, put it all up in my cubicle by my computer screen so it yelled at me all day long. And I happened to have a counseling session that day too. And when I went into her office, I asked her if we could move into another subject around perfectionism. I explained the situation to her. She just asked me a question, stating beforehand that it may sound cliche, but how was your relationship with your parents? And I hadn't really thought about that before, but the words just flowed out of my mouth that I felt, not thought, I felt I had to do big things to get their attention, or there was no attention. And she reaffirmed, so it was like all or nothing? And when I answered, yeah, I drifted off into my head, and from my heart, I felt these emotions of what it felt like not to feel loved or wanted in those moments where I wasn't doing extreme things that got their attention. My mind felt like it was perusing all the files that had to deal with this and all or nothing emotion. And I saw how it impacted different areas of my life, like school, perfections at school, perfection with friends, perfection with family, work, romantic relationships. And she interjected after a moment to ask if I was okay, because I was actually staring off at the ceiling, reflecting on it all. And it was then that I learned that I could swim in a world of gray instead of black and white, and was shortly fired later for not caring about my job. Just kidding. But that is a fear, right? That's some of what was swimming around in there too. The fear of being rejected for not living up to the standards, which is also reflected into the emotions and fear of abandonment when we were possibly cold-shouldered or sent to our rooms when we did something wrong. Positive thing about all this is that you don't have to do as much mental work in trying to transform thousands and thousands of thoughts and beliefs. When an emotional transformation transforms 1,000 or more thoughts at a time, we can make a lot of progress in a short amount of time. Though there is no rush. When we're ready to look at an emotion, we will get tugged on it by our child, our emotional child. That it's time, like a little child saying, Mom, 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 Mom. And as we approach changing thoughts and beliefs, the second thing that I realized is that when I have chosen a certain opinion for a significant amount of time, it can take time to make a new groove and form a new habit. I've found that when I've been reinforcing a habit for many years, that I don't realize I'm choosing some thought, emotion, energy, or action until much after I've chosen it, sometimes even years. Journaling helped me recognize patterns from the past when I went back and read over 5 years worth of journaling. And as I focus on changing my habit, I try to have reminders around me, whether that's a post-it note, a silent vibrating alarm on my mobile phone, a piece of jewelry or clothing, maybe even a tattoo. This helps me progress in my desire to change a habit, not because I have to, but because I want to. Habits we try to change because we're doing it for others doesn't normally take, and we end up reverting back to old habits. But when we want to change something because it feels uncomfortable enough for us, then we have the energy and drive behind it to change. We never change until we're ready to. And if our fears outweigh the uncomfortable feeling, we don't make change. But when that uncomfortable feeling outweighs our fears, then we act on change and are successful at making the change. Success at making the change can be defined as change made in any given moment. It doesn't matter if we bounce back to old ways for a moment. If we give ourselves the grace and be gentle with ourselves, not judging ourselves, that allows us to bounce back to the new habit. If we beat ourselves up, that is lower vibrational energy, which keeps us locked in the old habitual choices. So it is beneficial for us to accept ourselves unconditionally, especially when wanting to make change, but it's a great practice for every moment. We can organically change a habit by first recognizing it after a year or so, and then we move into recognizing it months and days after had chosen the old habit. Then as we progress down the path of change, we start realizing we're choosing the old habit while we're doing it, sometimes still doing it anyway, and other times successfully taking the off-ramp to the new habit choices. Eventually, we will start noticing the old habitual choice rising within us as the situation activates an old trigger, and again, either still choosing to go to the old habitual choice routine at times, or choosing the new habitual choice instead. At some point, it's no longer a big deal for us. The more pressure I put on myself to change, the harder it is to change, and the longer it takes, because my energy of wanting to change actually pushes the change further away, because my energy is telling the universe that I enjoy wanting to change. But in order for the wanting to exist, I can't have the change. So I go easy on myself, having gratitude for the changes I have made, and that invites more change with much less effort. These transformations are usually happening later in our lives, though I have seen self-reflection starting much earlier in indigo children and light workers that have come to help the planet evolve in its vibration. We might also start having impacts in our physical body appear as messages when our inner lower vibrational fear beliefs make their way to the outer world. We change from the inside out, not the outside in. We'll talk more about that in the next episode, as well as a bit about the development of our physical kid self. I'd love to hear about any experiences you have had with your own individual Saturn returns, and also anything about your mental and emotional journeys as you've visited with your own inner emotional child and your mental inner kid. And of course, if you have any questions about any of the content, please don't hesitate to ask. There are no stupid questions, and I mean it. This is an amazing adventure that we're all on, and we can all learn from each other. And you can either comment below, or if you'd prefer it to be more private, you can also email me at bradazen@gmail.com. All right, awesome. So until next time, remember, every second of every moment of our lives that we are eternally and unconditionally loved by the Mother and the Father of all things, our Creator. And of course, I love you too. So hang in there. Take care of you. We'll see you soon.